Well, a lot has happened in the Supreme Court since I did my last one of these videos. The most disturbing, of course, the 5-4 decision upholding SB 8, the Texas law that essentially overturned Roe v. Wade, making it illegal for a woman to get an abortion more than 6 weeks after conception. This was a monumental decision made in what is called the shadow docket. When the court is not in session, they will take cases that urgently need to be decided, very often whether or not to stay in execution. You can see why they have to do that. But SB 8, which overturns a basic right for women, was made without arguments, without briefs, a monumental decision to overturn a basic right. And that will take us back to a time when women had to get unsafe back alley abortions. So, in the wake of this, Justice Amy Coney Barrett gives a speech arguing that the Supreme Court is not partisan. Where did she choose to give this speech, that the court is not partisan? At the McConnell Center at the University of Louisville. There's Mitch McConnell. Now, why would she pick the McConnell Center with McConnell sitting there if they weren't just taunting us? I mean, she's not stupid. She's a liar. See, I questioned her back in 2017 during her confirmation hearing for a circuit court judge. I asked her about a group, the Alliance Defending Freedom, that she had been paid to speak before 5 times. The ADF had been identified as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracks hate groups, describes ADF as a group that has, quote, supported the recriminalization of homosexuality in the United States and criminalization abroad. Criminalization of homosexuality. Has defended state-sanctioned sterilization of transgender people abroad, has linked homosexuality to pedophilia, and claims that a homosexual agenda will destroy Christianity and society. In addition to the lawsuits it files, ADF also runs a training program for law students and young attorneys who share its views. Professor Barrett, if my understanding is correct, the payments you received from ADF were connected to presentations you delivered at ADF's training seminars. Is that right?
Yes.
And this is Senator Pat Leahy at her Supreme Court confirmation hearing 3 years later.
Were you aware of ADF's decades-long efforts to recriminalize homosexuality?
I am not aware of those efforts, no.
Do you forget that kind of thing? Now, remember the Rose Garden super spreader event where Trump announced her nomination? That was a big deal. And one of the VIPs there, Michael P. Ferris, president and CEO of the Alliance Defending Freedom. That was a pretty tough ticket to get. Now, here she is lying again during her confirmation hearing. Amy Klobuchar, my senior senator, asked her a pretty simple question.
Judge Barrett, under federal law, is it illegal to intimidate voters at the polls?
Senator Klobuchar, I can't characterize the facts in a hypothetical situation, and I can't apply the law to a hypothetical set of facts. I can only decide cases as they come to me, litigated by parties on a full record after fully engaging precedent, talking to colleagues, writing an opinion. And so I can't answer questions like that.
Okay, well, I'll make it easier. 18 U.S.C. 594 outlaws anyone who intimidates, threatens, coerces, or attempts to intimidate, threaten, or coerce any other person for the purpose of interfering with the right of such other person to vote. This is a law that has been on the books for decades.
Of course, the answer to that question, under federal law, is it illegal to intimidate voters at the polls, is yes. There's no hypothetical case here. There's no hypothetical set of facts. The answer is yes. Now, at this point, she had gone through law school at Notre Dame. She had been a professor of law at Notre Dame and a federal judge. Now, I had played a lawyer in a sketch, and I knew voter intimidation was against the law, and the sketch I was in had nothing to do with election law. Is Notre Dame such a terrible law school that she went through 3 years of law school and was a professor of law at Notre Dame and still somehow didn't know voter intimidation was illegal? Or, more likely, she didn't want to answer because voter intimidation is part of the Republican playbook. I texted Klobuchar right after her questioning. I wrote, Amy, tomorrow, how about starting with this? Judge Coney Barrett, I'm sorry I started off with such a difficult one yesterday, so I'm going to start you off with an easier one. Grand theft auto, is that illegal? Okay, let's move on, or backward, to the previous Supreme Court confirmation hearing. For Brett Kavanaugh, I'm going to play a piece from his opening statement at the hearing after Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony.
To repeat, all of the people identified by Dr. Ford as being present at the party have said they do not remember any such party ever happening. Importantly, her friend, Ms. Kaiser, has not only denied knowledge of the party, Ms. Kaiser said under penalty of felony, she does not know me, does not recall ever being at a party with me ever. And my two male friends who were allegedly there, who knew me well, have told this committee under penalty of felony that they do not recall any such party and that I never did or would do anything like this. Dr. Ford's allegation is not merely uncorroborated. It is refuted by the very people she says were there, including by a longtime friend of hers. Refuted.
Now, I think we all know the definition of refute. It means to prove wrong by argument or evidence. A county judge knows the meaning of refute, let alone someone nominated to the Supreme Court. Well, he very clearly said several times in his opening statement that the witnesses refuted Dr. Blasey Ford's claim. How? Well, those four people, the only four people whom the FBI questioned, didn't remember a party they had gone to 36 years ago, where nothing happened to them. That refutes Dr. Ford's claim? Why didn't anyone ask Kavanaugh if he remembers every party he went to in the last 36 years where nothing happened to him? Except one of those four witnesses was Mark Judge, Kavanaugh's buddy, who Dr. Blasey Ford identified as the other guy in the room with Kavanaugh that night. He was the guy who she said turned up the music so that the people downstairs couldn't hear her scream. Now, maybe Mark Judge honestly doesn't remember the party because he was a blackout drunk at the time. That's from the book Judge wrote, Wasted: Tales of a Gen X Drunk. The book featured a character named Bart O'Kavanaugh, who, among other things, passes out drunk and throws up in a car. You know, I wonder if now Justice Brett Kavanaugh remembers Bart O'Kavanaugh, the blackout drunk friend of Mark Judge's. Of course, Amy Klobuchar asked then Judge Kavanaugh whether he had ever blacked out himself.
So you're saying there's never been a case where you drank so much that you didn't remember what happened the night before or part of what happened?
That's, you're asking about, yeah, blackout. I don't know, have you?
Could you answer the question, Judge? That's not happened. Is that your answer?
Yeah, and I'm curious if you have.
I have no drinking problem, Judge.
Yeah, nor do I.
Okay, thank you.
You know, when I was watching this, I thought to myself, He seems very defensive about his drinking, doesn't he? Of course, in this nonpartisan way we have of choosing our justices, the FBI put up a tip line for people to call in stuff about Kavanaugh. Lots of people called in. I'm sure some of them were crank calls, but we know now that some of them weren't. But the Judiciary Committee never heard one of them because the FBI didn't investigate any of the tips. All the tips went directly to the office of the White House counsel, Don McGahn, and then directly to Don McGahn's wastebasket. Nothing partisan about that. Now, during his confirmation hearing, Neil Gorsuch spouted the same bullshit. There are no Republican judges and no Democratic judges. Well, I asked him about that, and notice his answer. What we're worried about is another 5-4 Roberts Court making one decision after another that hurts workers, employees, that hurts consumers. And, you know, you said earlier there's no Democratic judges, there are no Republican judges. If that's the case, what was Merrick Garland about? There was no answer. Merrick Garland didn't even get a hearing because Mitch McConnell said it was too close to the 2016 presidential election. Justice Scalia died in February. McConnell said, there's already been votes cast in New Hampshire in the primaries. Justice Coney Barrett was sworn in 9 days before the 2020 election. Tens of millions of votes had been cast in the actual presidential election. When this court undoes Roe, which I'm almost certain it will, the president and Democrats in the Senate should take a page from McConnell's book. Those two justices, the ones that replaced Scalia and Ginsburg, they should have been our judges. Yep, the Supreme Court has become partisan. By all rights, we should add 4 justices to the court. Now, to do that, we're going to need 50 votes, and we don't have them now for that. That means we have to pick up a couple Senate seats in 22. Let's beat Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. Let's elect a Democrat to replace Pat Toomey, who's retiring in Pennsylvania. And we have to keep Raphael Warnock's seat in Georgia. Await instructions.